I remember some time ago expressing that I don't think that I express my emotions very obviously. And I was thinking more like tone of voice and facial expressions. But recently I started learning about body language, like really studying body language. And I've discovered by observing myself as well as other people that I actually give off a great deal of information that I never noticed before. I think in this situation right now where the camera's on my face is like one of the places that expresses emotion the least, and my tone of voice is kind of monotone, I've been told by many people. But that also has this like positive effects as well. Like people say that it makes them feel safe and makes it seem like I'm very grounded and that it's very consistent, so it has those qualities as well. But yeah, I'm learning body language and I'm learning how much information I actually am giving off and how much information people are potentially receiving. And I find this fascinating, so that's why I'm expressing my thoughts and feelings in the present moment about this. Because I'm motivated to understand how people communicate on all levels. I don't want to just depend on people's ability to articulate with English language or any language to express what they're thinking and feeling. I want to be able to understand people deeply. So naturally I'm looking into these more universal forms of communication. And one of the books that I've added to my reading list is a book about like around the world, like all the different forms of body language, the body language that's universal no matter where you go, that's like built in really deeply to our limbic system, and like body language that's very culturally specific to an area. And already I've learned like holding hands between men in a lot of cultures is a deeply significant sign of like trust and connection, whereas in Western cultures, if I held your hand while we were walking along, it just wouldn't be received as something positive. It would actually trigger off a response in most Western men where they're actually uncomfortable. So learning these little nuances and stuff, because I live in a very multicultural place, and there's people walking around that are exhibiting all kinds of behaviors and things, and to be able to expand my vocabulary with with non-verbals. Is non-verbal even a part of vocabulary? I feel like I'm stretching the definition of the word vocabulary, but yeah, I want to broaden my understanding of how people communicate, how I can communicate to them, and how I can send and receive messages non-verbally. And as I'm exploring this, I'm contemplating and thinking, like, if you really understood body language deeply enough, you wouldn't need words at all. For most things, like, there's so much that you can indicate and share just through non-verbal communication. I also am motivated to learn more about non-verbal communication because I have clients that go non-verbal, and it's just purely like body language is the only thing left to read. But it's the core motivation is understanding myself, and I actually wanted to learn about body language so that I could communicate more effectively using my body. But then I'm learning that body language is, for the most part, automatic. Like it's programmed into like the oldest parts of ourselves. Like there's no conscious thought process involved in body language for the most part. Like I can now consciously exhibit signs of confidence because I know that this particular body language shows confidence, so I can express confidence, and I can express displays of power, or like I can challenge people with my body language, or I can invite people and welcome people and shrink my territorial presence with my body language to make the other person feel bigger and safer. So all of these things, like, mega incredible. And it all started because I was like, I wonder how how my communication is being received, because there's this whole thing. Communication is my chosen thing, like my one thing, you know, like choosing one thing, focus on that, master that, and then everything else will fall into place around that. I'm subscribing to that kind of philosophy. I chose communication to be my thing, my domain of mastery, and I got really good at verbally articulating things, being able to just turn the camera on and start talking about what I'm thinking and feeling, and a narrative comes through that isn't so disjointed. Early days, it may have come through and almost been unwatchable because I couldn't organize my thoughts at the pace that it's required to be able to communicate an ongoing transmission. But now I've gotten pretty good at the articulating on the fly and just like rolling with what I'm thinking and feeling and expressing it in live. And then, yeah, the next logical step for me was, okay, what's my face saying? Like, what about my facial expressions? What about my tone of voice? How can I practice and develop different tones of voice and different expressions so that I can deliver more communication than my words alone can transmit? But I kind of, almost by accident, went to the body language first, and then very early in that study I discovered that the most information that we get from each other is actually from the feet. The feet are the most telling part of the body, and actually as you go scan up through the body from the feet, it becomes less and less significant, because up here there's a lot more conscious thought involved, and you know, I could be to some extent controlling what you're seeing here, and that is actually what I'm doing all the time. That's why I don't express much with my facial expressions, I think. Comment down below if you think that I actually do express quite a bit with my expressions of my face, because that would be curious as well. But yeah, the feet and scanning up. Of course, like touching the face is like a pacifying behavior. So when you see me touching my face, it's like in this moment I'm just demonstrating it. But if I'm deep in thought about something and it's making me uncomfortable, like that's a pacifying behavior. It makes me feel safer. Touching the chest here is also a sign of vulnerability and like feeling unsafe, and it's like not necessarily unsafe from like a threat, but like even mentally unsafe because I'm in territory inside of myself that's making me feel uncomfortable, or like something might be revealed that would then make me quite vulnerable to the audience or to the person that I'm speaking to, if it's a person that's in front of me. All of these things, I wish that I studied this when I was like 12 or something, you know, like when I was young, and started to really consciously observe myself and make sure that my body was communicating what my mind and my heart are also trying to communicate. And an example of that has been, you know, an example of observing myself and realizing, catching myself reacting and changing my behavior, and then just through observation changing it back. They're like, okay, getting into a rambling state because I'm also nervous to share something, and I probably just touched my face. So examples. So I was at a restaurant with a beautiful young lady, and her feet underneath the table were touching my feet, and that's a sign of like intimacy, trust, and like connection. And then we're continuing to talk, and I wasn't observing closely enough to notice what it was that came up in the conversation, but it was probably only like 10 to 15 seconds before I noticed how my body language had changed, but I actually withdrew my feet back underneath my chair so that connection and intimacy, like the caressing of the feet with the feet, could no longer occur. So I've withdrawn from receiving that loving connection, and as soon as I noticed it, I put them back. But that's like just one example of like just observing yourself and your own body language and what you're communicating. Like, I don't even know why I withdrew in that moment in time, but as soon as I noticed in myself that I had withdrawn, I consciously decided, no, I'm safe and like I'm connected and this is a beautiful person, and I opened back up. Whereas I don't think that I would have if I hadn't been observing myself. Maybe I would have withdrawn and sort of forgotten that I'd withdrawn and just like stayed in that place, and then missed out on this like non-verbal thing that's not really even a conscious thing that's going on for her underneath the table. And that's like actually deepening our connection and our intimacy in that moment in time. So that's like the value, like just a real world example of the value of learning the body language, and why I'm saying I wish I learned this when I was like 12 so I can observe myself and observe others. But also, as I'm learning about body language, I am blown away by how intuitive I actually am. Like, I already knew all of this stuff on some level. I just wasn't observing it consciously all the time and like looking out for it. But it's a common, almost certain thing that people who grow up in families where there's like a traumatic environment, or where needs are not being met, or things are uncertain all the time, threatening all the time, whatever it is, where it's just not safe and it's not conducive to growth. Like, not necessarily saying my upbringing was totally negative, but it was definitely uncertain, and there were moments that were quite traumatic. So and also immigrants often report this, like they come to a new country and they don't know the language, so they have to be in that heightened presence and like observing the cues from the body language all the time. It's similar for somebody who grows up in a traumatic environment, where it's not that you don't understand the language, it's just that the language that's being communicated doesn't make sense. Like your parents just yelling at you all the time about stuff that doesn't connect logically for you as a child. Like, you're going to then be constantly on the lookout, scanning for body language, scanning for signs of anger, discomfort. Is mum pacifying? Is mum feeling unsafe? Because that means that I'm going to withdraw, or maybe I'll go to my room, maybe I'll go outside, maybe I'll jump on my bike and ride around the neighborhood just to get away from, as I'm observing all of this body language that's indicating to me that this environment's no longer safe. So like, I've developed this intuitive understanding, and all of the things that I'm studying, observing, like, it doesn't take long to integrate it, because I'm like, yeah, I already knew that, but now I just know it more consciously, and I can start to catalog like conscious observations of these things taking place. I'm loving it. Like, I wish that there was a university degree in understanding nonverbal communication. Like, I'm really obsessed with this. Like, I haven't been this invested in learning something since holographic kinetics. But interestingly enough, this information is helpful for that as well, because if I have a client that's coming for a session and I need to have dominance to a degree, like I need to control that environment so that it's safe for everything to take place, but I can also look out for like signs that they are feeling unsafe or uncomfortable or insecure. Are they pacifying? Do they just need a moment? Or is there something genuinely taking place where they're not respecting the process or something like that? Like, I get way more information from the client as they walk in And that also probably helps them feel safer and more confident that I'm responding not only to the words that are coming out of their mouth, but I'm responding on all levels. Like I can, before they've even opened their mouth, I can say like, look, I can see that you're feeling uncomfortable. Do you want to sit down for a moment, take a few deep breaths? Like that stuff is invaluable, you know, like this is what we want to know as humans. Or even if you are out like looking for a new potential partner or friendship, like before you even approach somebody to start the interaction, you can have all the information that I used to have massive social anxiety. You wouldn't believe it now at all. But one way that I tried to tackle that was just deliberately approaching strangers. I did video journals about it and everything. They're probably deleted now because they're so far back in time, and I went through that whole delete everything phase. But yeah, I just deliberately approached strangers on a regular basis. There's a stranger here right now. How fascinating. And I just didn't have any information because I was in this like deterministic mindset where like I'm going to approach like 4 strangers today regardless of the outcome, and I was going for this like brute force, ego driven, just get rejected in these like 4 conversations so that you can build up like resilience and tolerance to being rejected. Knowing what I know now, I would not have been rejected. I would have got 4 out of 4 brand new like connections with people that were really exciting and interesting, because I would be able to begin my approach, observe the body language, observe like what their body is saying to me. Am I open? Am I excited? Am I do I want to be connected with? Like just all this information is on the person's body language. So now I have 100% confidence when I approach anybody. I know what the outcome is going to be to a certain extent. Sometimes you can misread people because you don't know their baseline body language. Particularly with women, I've found like women can just look really open and kind and gentle and like inviting, but that's just like cultural programming, and they're just trying to be nice because that's what they feel they should be doing, but they're actually really uncomfortable. So they like, when I approach somebody like that, they might be like smiling and like, hey, how you going? Like really pleasant. But then I immediately see within minutes, like the pacifying behaviors, the feeling unsafe. Another thing, if you're standing, like one of the feet will turn in the direction of the exit, like where they want to go to get away. Like all of these things will start to take place. And then it took me a while to like put 2 and 2 together and think about the cultural programming and everything, and or like read some books and like just for it to compute, like these women are just being nice because they feel that they have to, but they're actually not feeling comfortable and they don't want this interaction to take place. All these things, like this, see how much depth this is. Like I could talk about it all day. Every little piece that comes into my awareness is like connected to so many other pieces. So that's why this kind of stuff becomes like an obsession for me, like a healthy, nice obsession that I want to have. Obsession has negative connotations, right? You know, like obsession sounds unhealthy. It's, in my awareness, it feels similar to the realm of addiction. But it's like a healthy obsession. I want to spend a lot of time and invest a lot of energy into learning body language. Just like I want to invest a lot of time and energy into learning holographic kinetics. And yeah, like I said, they go together, and more of these things that I'm studying more deeply are going together, and I'm forming a more cohesive, holistic picture of how to show up in the world and how to help people heal themselves and connect with one another. I'm learning heaps about myself, which I feel like is the absolute most fundamental thing in this reality, in life. Like, you got to learn about yourself. How can I approach people in the mental health system or beyond if I don't have some kind of understanding about who I am, what I'm doing here, how this life thing works, how to create meaning, how to navigate discomfort, and all of these existential questions that plague the human mind? Have I Have I dived deeply into every single aspect of myself and resolved any issues that are emerging? It's always ongoing, there's always more growth, but the more that I understand myself, it's like I understand all these parts of being human. And I don't have all of the parts, like I don't understand everything because I'm just one person that's like navigating this experience, but through these studies of body language and holographic kinetics, I definitely get a much richer, more comprehensive picture about humans being. If you get anything out of these journals, please let me know what kinds of insights you're having, thoughts and feelings that are emerging in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Click the like button for me, it goes a long way. It makes the videos spread to people who have similar interests to you. I'm pretty sure that's how this algorithm thing works. And check out kylivs.com if you get a chance. Pretty impressed with that website design. See you again shortly.